The gas giant filled half the sky like a bruised lantern, its storms swirling in silent violence, though the soundless vacuum gave it an eerie serenity. The abandoned station hung in its orbit, a drifting carcass of a bygone age, its metal ribs groaning whenever a loose panel shifted under stresses it was no longer built to endure. Inside, the silence was broken only by the hiss of recycled oxygen struggling to push through pipes too old to care about efficiency anymore. He had learned to tune it out. Or, at least, he thought he had, until a new sound intruded. A voice. Not through the comm, not the familiar static-laced mumble of a station computer, but a clear, melodic voice bouncing awkwardly against the empty corridors. He froze. He was very certain he had been alone here. Salvage work didn't generally involve unexpected company, unless you counted rodents engineered to survive space pressure leaks or the occasional predatory drone that hadn't been told the war it served in had ended centuries ago. But this wasn't skittering claws or the whir of mechanical wings. It was someone speaking. Speaking his language, too. The voice came again, closer this time. Human, show me. He blinked rapidly, trying to make sense of the words. Show me what? Show me where? He didn't remember signing up to give tours to locals, unless the rusted bulkheads and occasional sparks counted as five-star attractions. He clutched his tool bag instinctively, which was ridiculous, because there was no way a spanner would be effective against anything that survived out here long enough to ambush him. Then she appeared. At first, in the dim emergency light, he thought his mind had finally snapped from isolation and lack of proper meals. She was shaped like him. Human, unmistakably so. Long hair tied back loosely, eyes reflecting the sickly blue glow of failing consoles, posture upright and confident as if the whole derelict station belonged to her. And yet, her ears. They were long, tapered elegantly, catching the light with an almost otherworldly grace, as if someone had taken the familiar human outline and drawn it out into something just slightly unreal. She looked at him with bright curiosity, not a hint of fear. If anything, she seemed excited, like a child who had just spotted a rare animal through a glass tank. So you are real, she said, her tone halfway between triumph and delight. A human. Excellent. Now you must show me how you breed. He almost choked on his own breath. Excuse me, what? She tilted her head. Breed. Propagate. Manufacture new versions of yourself. Multiplication, replication. You know, the thing that keeps your species from vanishing like, she paused, tapping her chin with her finger. Like this station, I suppose. The man opened his mouth, then shut it again. His brain refused to line up appropriate responses. He finally managed, that's not exactly small talk. Her ears twitched. Small talk. You mean unimportant chatter? Why waste breath when one can ask the most important questions first? She smiled as though she had just delivered wisdom profound enough to end all arguments. Because, he muttered, running a hand down his face, it's polite not to traumatize strangers within 30 seconds of meeting them. She blinked. You are traumatized. Already? You humans are fragile. Despite himself, he barked a laugh. That's one way to put it. She stepped closer, utterly ignoring the way his body stiffened. I will need details. Many details. Charts, perhaps. Demonstrations if necessary. He backed up so fast he hit a bulkhead. The clang echoed down the corridor like a mockery. Demonstrations? Absolutely not. That's, no. No demonstrations. Ah, she said thoughtfully, as if considering a technical schematic. So your species is private about this matter. Interesting. My people conduct demonstrations during festivals. Very efficient way to educate the young. He groaned. That is, too much information. Her lips quirked up. But isn't that why I'm here? To exchange too much information. There it was again, the absurdity of the situation colliding with the sterile hum of failing machinery around them. A laugh slipped out before he could stop it, half hysterical, half genuine. He was supposed to be cataloging structural weaknesses, salvaging parts for resale, maybe, just maybe, finding something worth more than the cost of fuel to get back home. Instead, he was cornered by a tall, long-eared alien girl who apparently thought he was a walking encyclopedia on human reproduction. "Okay," he said slowly, holding up his hands. "Let's start over. I'm me. Just a guy. And you are." "Curious," she said promptly. Then, after a pause, "That is as accurate a name as any." He tried not to laugh again, but failed. "Curious. Of course. That's fitting." Curious leaned closer, peering at the lines on his face as if they were written in code. "You laugh often. Is this a survival strategy? An attempt to confuse predators?" "Yes," he said deadpan. "When I see something with big teeth, I just start cracking jokes and hope it dies of second-hand embarrassment." She gasped softly, eyes widening. "Ingenious. Truly ingenious. Perhaps I will adopt this method." He rubbed his temples. "Please don't." The corridor lights flickered then, a reminder that this floating ruin wasn't about to pause its decay just because the universe had decided to prank him. Sparks rained from a panel overhead, and Curious tilted her head, fascinated. "This place groans," she murmured. "Like an old beast dreaming in its sleep." "That beast is going to collapse if we're not careful," he muttered, adjusting his tool bag again. "Which brings me to my next question, why are you here?" "I followed the trail," she said simply. "What trail?" "The human trail. The transmissions. So many recordings, so many signals, spilling into space. But always about wars, or trade, or strange entertainments where humans shout at one another while others watch. I wanted to see what you were like in person." She leaned back, smiling faintly. "I did not expect you to be so small." He scowled. "I'm average height. For a human, perhaps." She gestured to herself. "For me, you are small." He threw his hands up. "Great. First time I've met an alien and I'm already being judged for my height." "Height is relative," she said, but the mischief in her eyes was unmistakable. He sighed, trying not to smile. Somehow, despite her wildly inappropriate opening question, she didn't feel like a threat. Maybe it was the way she tilted her head, or the sparkle in her eyes when she teased him. Or maybe he was losing his mind. Both were possible. "All right, Curious," he said finally. "If you're going to tag along, you have to follow some rules." "Rules?" "Yes. Rule 1, no more sudden questions about breeding. Rule 2, try not to touch anything that sparks. Rule 3, don't get us killed." She considered this gravely. "And if I break the rules? Then I don't know. Glare at you." Her ears twitched again, and then she grinned. "That sounds fun. Proceed, human. Show me more of your world." He shook his head, already regretting everything. But somehow, in the middle of the derelict station, orbiting a storm-racked giant, he found himself smiling. The station's artificial night cycle had never been convincing. The panels overhead dimmed only halfway, leaving the corridors soaked in a perpetual dusk that hummed faintly with the energy of half-dead circuits. He sat cross-legged on a crate, staring at a ration pack that had expired 3 years ago, trying to decide if the faint smell of vinegar was part of the recipe or just nature's way of saying don't. Curious sat opposite him, her long ears twitching every time the faint wind of the ventilation ducts brushed past. Unlike him, she looked perfectly at home here, as if crumbling stations were the kind of playground she had grown up in. She was fiddling with one of his wrenches, holding it upside down and then sideways, frowning at it as though it had deeply insulted her family line. "What is the purpose of this?" she asked finally, holding it up like a trophy. It's a wrench, he muttered. Yes, I gathered that. But why wrench? It is heavy, clumsy, and clearly intended for smashing, not repairing. He sighed. It's for loosening bolts. She blinked, unimpressed. So you humans conquered space with bolt looseners? Hey, he said, stabbing a finger at her, don't knock the bolt loosener. Without that thing, I'd still be locked out of the air recycler, and we'd both be suffocating right now. Her ears twitched again, and she smirked. You do realize suffocation would have solved my question about human breeding rather decisively, yes? Dead humans don't breed. He groaned and shoved the expired ration pack into his mouth just to stop himself from replying. The sour taste nearly made him regret it. Nearly. Curious tilted her head. Is that food? Technically, he said through the chew. It's a ration. Keeps you alive. Sort of. I think it was designed by people who hated joy. She leaned forward, fascinated. May I try it? Sure. If you're feeling brave. He tossed her the packet. She sniffed it, then nibbled delicately at the edge. A moment later, her face twisted like someone had just poured molten acid over her tongue. This is a war crime. He laughed so hard he almost choked. Yeah, welcome to the human diet in space. If we don't die from radiation or air loss, our food will finish the job. She spat the remains into a corner, ears flaring indignantly. My people would never tolerate such misery. We ferment our food properly. There are symphonies of flavor where I come from. Yeah, well, he said, wiping tears of laughter from his eyes, next time bring a lunchbox from home. For a moment, the silence stretched between them, broken only by the faint buzz of the failing lights. Then she leaned back against the crate, arms crossed, studying him like a puzzle she was almost close to solving. You really are fascinating, she said softly. He raised an eyebrow. Because I can eat expired glue. Because you laugh, she replied. At death, at discomfort, at flavorless food. You laugh like it's a weapon. He looked away, suddenly uncomfortable. Yeah, well. It's either that or cry, and I'm not much of a crier. She considered that for a moment, then smiled faintly. I like the weapon better. He didn't answer. Instead, he pulled out a small scanner from his kit, pretending to be busy. The truth was, he didn't know how to handle the sincerity in her tone. Humor was safe. Humor was armor. But sincerity? That was dangerous. The scanner beeped weakly, drawing his attention back to the task at hand. Great, he muttered. Power levels dropping faster than expected. If we don't reroute through the auxiliary core, this place is going to go dark. Curious perked up. Dark as in dark? Or dark as in explode? Both. Excellent. He gave her a flat look. Why does that excite you? Because, she said, hopping off the crate with alarming enthusiasm, darkness reveals truths. Things hide in shadows. Explosions reveal what's inside. That's a very unsettling philosophy. It keeps life interesting. She offered him a hand, and for some reason, he took it. Together, they moved deeper into the station's guts, past collapsed bulkheads and flickering light panels. The smell of burned wiring thickened with every step, and occasionally a burst of static crackled through the intercom, ghostly echoes of messages long forgotten. Curious hummed as they walked, some strange tune with shifting intervals that made his skin crawl in a not unpleasant way. When he asked what it was, she shrugged. A nursery song. About stars eating each other. Comforting. It is for us. By the time they reached the auxiliary core, the tension in his shoulders had started to fade, replaced by something more absurd, amusement. Here he was, knee-deep in dust and loose wires, partnered with a tall alien girl who sang cheerful songs about cannibalistic stars, and he wasn't panicking. Maybe he had lost his mind after all. The core chamber was a wreck. Panels hung loose, wires dangled like vines, and the humming crystal that should have been pulsing with steady light now flickered weakly, like a dying candle. "All right," he muttered, kneeling beside the controls. "If I can bypass the overload, we might get another few days of power." Curious crouched next to him, watching intently. "Do you require assistance?" "Not unless you know advanced human engineering." "I know how to smash things." "Not helpful." She reached out anyway, brushing her fingers along the console. To his surprise, the flickering crystal pulsed brighter, as if reacting to her touch. He froze. "What did you just do?" She blinked innocently. "I touched it." "No, I saw that." "But it responded." Liked you." Her ears twitched. "Machines often like me. They find me charming." "That's not, machines don't." He gave up, running a hand through his hair. "Okay. Sure. You're machine charming. Add that to your resume." "What is a resume?" Never mind." The crystal steadied under her hand, humming louder now, and the lights in the chamber flickered back to life. She grinned at him, clearly delighted. "You're a walking battery," he muttered. "Why didn't you say so earlier?" "Because you didn't ask." He laughed again, shaking his head. "Of course. Should have known." The two of them stayed there for a while, the hum of the revived core filling the silence. For the first time since he'd set foot on the derelict station, he felt something close to hope. And it wasn't just because the lights had come back on. The corridor lights had taken on a nervous flicker, like they knew secrets but didn't want to spill them all at once. He walked carefully, one hand brushing against the cold wall for balance, the other gripping his scanner. Behind him, Curious padded silently, except when she didn't. Every few steps she would stop, crouch, press her ear against a panel as if the station's bones were whispering to her. The image might have been eerie if she didn't punctuate it by muttering things like, "This one sounds like it's hungry," or, "This panel is humming in the wrong key." "Do you do this everywhere?" he asked over his shoulder. "Yes," she said solemnly. "I listen. It helps me understand." "Understand what?" "The station's mood swings." "Exactly." He shook his head. "I'm trapped in a haunted scrapyard with a space elf psychologist." "Great." Her ears twitched at the word elf, but she didn't ask. Instead, she leapt ahead of him, light on her feet, and pointed at a sealed hatch. "Something waits behind this one." He eyed the hatch. "Hopefully it's not a lawsuit waiting to happen." "A what?" "Never mind. Just, stay back." He keyed in a manual override on the panel. It coughed sparks, complained with a groan, and then slowly ground itself open. A hiss of stale air burst out, carrying with it a smell like rust and forgotten libraries. The room beyond was darker than dark, a silence pressed thick against the edges. He swept his lamp inside, and the beam caught on something unexpected, rows of crystalline pods, each tall as he was, arranged like worshippers in a long-abandoned temple. Curious slipped in behind him, her eyes wide, ears twitching in sharp little movements. "Sleepers," she whispered. "Sleepers?" "Yes." She touched one of the pods, her fingers gliding along the cool surface. "Travelers who cross time by stealing from it. They close their eyes for centuries and open them to find themselves in new worlds." "Cryogenic stasis," he muttered. "Or something close enough." Curious tilted her head at him. "You always give smaller names to bigger things. Like calling a star hot or calling death unfortunate." "It's how humans cope," he said, moving closer to another pod. His lamp revealed the outline of a figure inside, vaguely humanoid, features blurred by layers of frost. "We shrink things down until they feel manageable. And when they are not manageable, then we make jokes about it." She smiled faintly. Of course. He moved along the row, counting pods. Most were still sealed, though the frost suggested they'd been left untended for decades, maybe centuries. But at the far end, one pod stood open, its door gaping like a jaw, interior dark and empty. His stomach dropped. That one's missing its sleeper, he said slowly. Curious leaned inside, studying the emptiness. Perhaps they woke. Perhaps they wandered off. Or perhaps they're wandering around, he said uneasily. She grinned, far too delighted. Exciting. Terrifying, he corrected. Same thing. They moved on, but he kept glancing back at the empty pod, half expecting something to slink out of the shadows. The silence of the chamber weighed on him, more than the flicker of the failing lights ever had. It was a silence that suggested breath being held. By the time they returned to the corridor, he was grateful for the hiss of air vents and the occasional spark shower. At least those noises admitted to existing. Curious was still smiling. You humans worry too much. You don't worry enough. Balance, then. Together we are average. He snorted. Average. That's what every guy wants to hear when he's crawling around a derelict with an alien girl. Would you prefer exceptional? She teased. I'd prefer alive. Their banter carried them to another section of the station, the hydroponics bay. Or what used to be. The door slid open with a reluctant screech, and the smell hit them first, damp, musty, alive. Plants had overrun the bay, not the carefully engineered crops meant to feed crews, but wild growth, twisted vines glowing faintly with bioluminescence. Some pulsed in rhythm, like green hearts beating slowly in the dark. Well, he muttered. Someone forgot to turn off the sprinklers. Curious stepped inside eagerly, brushing her hands along the leaves. Beautiful. They have adapted. Survived. Even without caretakers. Yeah, he said, eyeing a vine that coiled a little too eagerly toward his ankle, some of them look too eager to survive. A fat blossom opened near his face, exhaling a puff of glittering spores. He coughed violently, waving his hands. Fantastic. Murder plants. Just what this place needed. Curious laughed, a sound that echoed oddly in the damp air. You humans always assume danger. Perhaps it only wished to greet you. By choking me to death. An affectionate greeting. He glared at her, but she only smirked. Still, he kept his mask pulled tighter as they pushed deeper. The plants thickened until they formed walls, corridors within corridors. Strange fruit glowed faintly overhead, and he swore he could hear whispers in the rustling leaves. Curious moved like she belonged there, plucking a glowing berry and popping it into her mouth before he could stop her. Hey, he hissed. Do you want to die? She chewed thoughtfully. Sweet. With an aftertaste of iron. He stared at her in disbelief. You are insane. Or immune. Or both, he muttered. They stumbled into a clearing at the heart of the overgrowth, and there they found it, a terminal, half buried in roots, screen flickering with faint glyphs. He brushed away vines, coughing at the spores, and squinted at the display. It wasn't human script. Not entirely. The letters shifted between familiar shapes and alien curves, like two languages wrestling for control. Curious leaned over his shoulder. This is old. Very old. Can you read it? Parts. She traced the glowing symbols with a finger. It speaks of exchange. A gathering. Many species trading knowledge here. This station was once alive. He frowned. Then what happened to it? She didn't answer. Her ears twitched, and she looked into the tangled shadows beyond the terminal. For the first time since he'd met her, she seemed unsettled. He swallowed hard, forcing levity into his voice. Don't tell me the plants ate the crew. That's one hell of a vegetarian uprising. Her lips curved, but her eyes remained wary. Perhaps. The vines rustled behind them, and for a moment, he thought he saw something shift, too large, too purposeful to be mere growth. Right, he said quickly. We're leaving now. Before the salad decides we're the croutons. She laughed, but the sound was thinner than before. They retraced their steps, weaving back through the glowing corridors, but the sense of being watched never left him. He cracked jokes under his breath, about carnivorous kale, about how humanity's ultimate enemy turned out to be lettuce, but none of it shook the feeling that the station itself was listening. And maybe laughing back. When they finally stepped into the corridor again, the metallic air tasted clean despite the dust. He leaned against the wall, exhaling slowly. Curious stood beside him, her expression unreadable. Then she said, very quietly, "This place remembers." He didn't ask what she meant. He wasn't sure he wanted to know. So instead, he smiled faintly and said, "Well, at least it remembers to feed the plants. Shame about the menu, though." This time, she laughed, the sound richer, and some of the weight lifted. The station had begun to sigh in earnest, as though it was tired of holding itself together and wanted everyone inside to know it. The groans and shudders echoed through the corridors with a rhythm that felt less like failing machinery and more like a countdown. He walked faster than usual, boots scraping against the floor panels, his toolkit banging against his hip. Curious trailed at his side, her pace unhurried, ears twitching like antennae tuning into every creak and whisper. "Shouldn't we move a little quicker?" he muttered. She tilted her head. "Why? If the station collapses, it collapses. Running won't change that. It might change whether I'm underneath it or not." Her lips curled into a smile. "You humans do love outrunning inevitabilities." He opened his mouth to argue, then shut it again. She wasn't wrong. Humanity had spent millennia running, first from predators, then from plagues, then from one another. And now, from the stars themselves. He laughed under his breath. "Yeah. I guess we do." They turned into the central corridor leading back to the auxiliary core. He'd rigged it enough to keep the lights on, but the new readings on his scanner told him it wouldn't hold for long. The core's crystal hummed unevenly, shivering with every pulse. Curious placed a hand against the wall as they passed, fingers splayed. "It's afraid," she said softly. He arched a brow. "The wall is afraid." "The station," she corrected. "It remembers what it was meant for, connection, exchange, life. Now it dies alone. Wouldn't you be afraid?" He didn't answer. Instead, he busied himself with the scanner again, though he wasn't really reading it. Her words had landed in a place he didn't want to acknowledge. At the core chamber, he set his tools down and knelt beside the console. "If I reroute this properly, I might be able to give us a clean shutdown sequence. Keep the station from ripping itself apart. Buy time." "Time for what?" He hesitated. "For you to go. Get back to wherever you came from. You don't have to get buried with me here." Curious crouched beside him, her long ears brushing close to his shoulder. "You think I followed the human trail all this way just to leave before the last question is answered?" He sighed. "Of course not." Her smile widened. "Good. Then stop wasting time with wires and show me." He blinked at her. "Show you what?" "You know what." He dropped his wrench with a loud clatter. "We are not circling back to that conversation right now." "Why not?" "The station may collapse. Death is near. Isn't this when humans are supposed to confess everything they've hidden?" He rubbed his temples. "That's for movies. Not real life." She leaned closer, eyes glittering with mischief. "Are you certain?" He let out a strangled laugh. "You are relentless." "I am curious." He stared at her for a long moment, then shook his head. "You want to know how humans breed? Fine. But you're not getting diagrams, and definitely not demonstrations. Agreed, she said, grin widening. So he told her. Not in the blunt, biological detail she expected, he refused to give her a clinical lecture, but in his own fumbling way. He talked about how humans sought one another out, not just with bodies but with minds, with trust, with laughter. He explained that breeding wasn't just reproduction, but connection, an act that created bonds as much as it created new life. He admitted, awkwardly, that half the time humans weren't even thinking about survival when they did it, they were thinking about closeness, about not being alone. Curious listened intently, ears twitching with every word. When he finished, she didn't laugh at him or demand more detail. She just nodded slowly, as though something important had clicked into place. So it is not just function, she said at last. It is meaning. Yeah, he said softly. Exactly. For a while, neither of them spoke. The core hummed weakly, the station groaned, and somewhere in the distance, metal gave way with a thunderous crack. Dust sifted down from the ceiling, glittering in the failing light. Then Curious reached out and touched his hand. Not like she had when dragging him along corridors or steadying him through broken gravity fields. This time it was deliberate, gentle, and oddly grounding. Thank you, she whispered. He swallowed hard. For what? For telling me what it means to be human. For making me laugh. For showing me that even at the edge of collapse, you can still find joy. He wanted to make a joke, to deflect, but the lump in his throat wouldn't let him. So he just squeezed her hand back. The console beeped, breaking the moment. He turned quickly, grateful for the distraction. All right, looks like the shutdown sequence is ready. We can stabilize the core long enough to get to the docking ring. And then we get out of here. They worked quickly, rerouting energy, sealing off collapsing corridors, and resetting the station's dying systems just enough to keep it from tearing itself apart. Curious lent her strange ability again. When she touched the console, the crystal pulsed brighter, steadying in a way his tools never could. He didn't question it this time. He just accepted that she was part of the solution. By the time they reached the docking ring, the station was groaning like an old beast ready to lie down for the last time. His shuttle sat waiting, patched together from parts scavenged across half the galaxy, its hull scarred but still functional. He turned to Curious. You coming with me? Her ears twitched, and she tilted her head. Do you want me to? He hesitated, then nodded. Yeah. I think I do. She smiled, the kind of smile that made the failing light seem brighter. Then yes. They climbed aboard, sealed the hatch, and powered up the engines. As the shuttle detached, the station shuddered one last time. From the viewport, he watched it drift against the backdrop of the stormy gas giant, lights flickering out section by section until only darkness remained. Curious leaned against the glass, watching too. It was beautiful, she said softly. Even in ruin. Especially in ruin. He thought about that as the shuttle slipped into open space, leaving the derelict behind. He realized he wasn't the same man who had arrived here, armed only with tools, sarcasm, and a desperate need for salvage. He had come expecting loneliness, danger, maybe profit. Instead, he had found an alien girl with long ears, endless questions, and a talent for breaking through his defenses with laughter. She turned to him then, eyes shining, and asked, "So what happens now?" He grinned. Now I show you what else humans do when we're not breeding. We fly, we explore, we get lost, we eat terrible food, we make bad jokes, and sometimes, we make friends. Her smile widened. That sounds acceptable. And as the shuttle disappeared into the star-speckled dark, leaving the station's memory behind, he realized that for the first time in a very long time, he wasn't running from something. He was running toward something. Maybe even someone.